Hello, good evening. This is Starseed Jason Moss. I bring you peace and love and unity as we extend our consciousness into the fifth dimension and elevate ourselves beyond the third dimensional separation of division and on this plane, the duality of ego. Ego is truly a very lower planed thinking and very much a divider. Eliminating the inner ego is very difficult for people to do in this dimension, so it's not something that I think everybody can accomplish immediately. It does take time to dissolve and decrystallize those needs to hold on to the inner self and to the ego of the self in that respect. The more we hold on to the inner ego, the more that we continue to separate ourselves and our own inner conscious minds from a deeper connection which is waiting for us somewhere beyond that veil. And I believe that the best way to describe this, people have called it the veil, which prevents people from seeing the ET families for which they feel connected to. I believe that the veil can be removed as long as you remove the ego within. As long as you can at least dissolve it enough within yourself and release your inhibitions and release those things which are holding you back. For instance, anger, resentment, jealousy, and discouragement and pain and all these things. You see, I find it's very difficult, it's very easy. It's difficult to explain this, but it's easy for someone to get discouraged who has a lack of understanding of what I'm talking about. And so I think if you're going to learn to drive the car, you have to first of all go to driver's education. You want to drive the consciousness into the higher dimension. There has to be some education in this. Again, as I said before, I'm not a professional. I don't sell anything. I respect those individuals who make a living doing this. I don't put down individuals and people who are, selling their knowledge of spirituality. I consider myself a student, and I'm somebody that is in the process of relearning what I've already learned from a former life in which all this information was already there. Unconditional love and the complete surrendering of equality into unity and the bond, which unifies consciousnesses into one. The love which is shared between two people in the third dimension is a love which maintains an ego of separateness between two individuals sharing a bond and unity in a relationship that is agreed mutually to coexist together as man and wife, or female to female, male to male, whichever your preference may be. And this relationship has all the ingredients of separation from the beginning. You are married, and the first thing you say at the altar is, "Until death do you part." So even from the very beginning, there's we're seasoning the beginning of a relationship with the ingredients of separation at some point in its future. When I'm connecting to Beniko, there isn't any "till death do us part." There isn't any separation of any kind. There isn't anything like this. When you interact with a telepathic, thought projective being in the intimate capacity for which I have done so in my life, they imprint themselves, their feelings, their heart, they don't force it onto you. You feel the loving connection reciprocating instantly. You become sort of another version of that being. In other words, this is how they live their lives. This is how they exist, cohabitate together, is through a thought projective connection of oneness of mind. There isn't any ego in this civilization which prevents them from doing so. The human race has male-female. We're dealing with beings, many are androgynous, having both male-female sex organs within them. And the unity and the beauty of such beings is hard to put into words. It's even harder to describe the loving connection that I share with Beniko, very deeply loving connection with this. I often call her her, and that's okay. She understands my reasoning for this. When we talk about the issue of face-to-face contact, and many people have complained about the lack of face-to-face contact, let me say again that some of the greatest scientists in the world are right now listening with the most expensive radio dishes in existence and into deep space for the radio signals from civilizations out there. And they may in fact find and locate that radio signal in a time frame that is rapidly approaching. And they will be connecting to a civilization that is very much like the human race. A civilization that is not telepathic, it is not thought projective. And what that means essentially is that a civilization that does not use radio communication and television or any kind of electronic means of communication, a civilization that does not rely on this because of their telepathy, their thought projection ability inside their starships, inside the craft you call UFOs. You may find viewing screens and things like this, but you won't find transmitters. You're not going to find radio frequency in which they're communicating with each other on. You may find some form of a communicator, a hand palm device, which interfaces with their minds directly and transmits and receives on the theta band frequency of their minds, which is a very high frequency, much higher than a human brain's frequency. And that in itself is not going to be detected by radio astronomers. They won't pick this up. This isn't going to be something that you're going to be able to switch on and tune into with a device. So let me just say that very simply, a thought projective telepathic race is not reliant on the technology of mobile phones, CB radios, and things like this. But let's go a bit deeper than that for just a minute now. It's one thing to send a message to and from someone, but the human race exists in a third-dimensional sense of no telepathy, no thought projective abilities. Now, for this reason, the human race is constantly expecting contact to be a face-to-face issue, and for some it is. And for the purposes of some of these civilizations, they have made contact with governments of this world and individuals, i.e., someone like myself. I have seen and held one of them in my arms who hugged me back. The being I've been telling you about, Sasasini girl named Beniko. When I'm telling you about that experience, this was a physical contact experience that I can remember. But that's not going to be for everybody, and there's a reason for this. The philosophy of this civilization is one of, why do you wish to see us face to face when we are already in contact with many people in your world mentally? Now let me just talk about channeling just for a second. Channeling is defined as receiving messages to the mind from another being, from another place, someplace else, usually extra-dimensionally, hanging over the channeler in some extra-dimensional sense. These beings are not dead. They are not deceased. They are not energy ghosts floating about, and neither is this the imagination of the channeler. The channeler is not imagining these things and fabricating them of his own mind or her mind. This information is genuine and valid, very real. And in my own work with this, I've managed to channel Beniko in my mind, simultaneously recording with my digital recorder, which picked up an audio recording, an electronic voice phenomenon known as EVP, of her saying things on the recording, which coincided. Prior to hearing that recording, I was actually receiving messages, communication messages in my mind, specific messages that I understood, and I had already decided that's what the message was. And then when I played the digital recorder, I actually heard the very same message on the recorder. So what I'm telling you is that we are dealing with living, breathing, sentient beings. These are not ghosts. These aren't spirit beings. When they're sending these messages, and my own experiment has shown this is a telepathic communication, high frequency, high vibrational theta frequency transmission of a telepathic brain of a much larger capacity than that of a human physical brain. And now, though these are extra-dimensional beings, I'm to understand that they do use, some of them do use a technological means to get to higher dimensions. Yeah, what you're expecting when you say face-to-face contact, many of you wish a face-to-face contact, and if you don't get this, you get discouraged. Let me first of all talk about a civilization, again, which does not recognize the importance of physical face-to-face contact. When a being is speaking through a channeler to an audience, a human channeler on this planet, as far as that being is concerned, he, she is in fact seeing and visiting that audience as intimately as if the being were visiting his or her own family in their own world, in their time frame. There isn't necessarily a need to see anybody physically face to face, and this is their own interpretation of this. They're saying to me, why do you want physical face-to-face contact? For what proof? To what purpose? To what end? To put in the museum? To quantify so you can then study this? We're giving you information through people here. To us, in our civilization, the mind and the importance of the connection of the mind from one mind to another is as physically real to us in every capacity as when you human beings see each other face to face and shake hands intimately. So, because our whole civilization is based on thought projection and telepathy, you need to explore this philosophy and the much deeper meaning behind what that means and what kind of an impact that has on a race and a civilization that is thought projective in that regard. It's one thing to say they're telepaths and they just talk to us, but you need to really look very deeply into what that means and how that civilization would be structured around such abilities. In what way? What kind of a thinking? I know the answer to this. I could sit here and go on a video like this. I'm just going to point you in some directions for the moment. Think about their ego inside them and the lack of ego for which they have and their oneness and unity. Okay, resonate with this just for a minute. Psychics and mediums in this world have got the right idea. They're on the right path when they're channeling individuals who have passed on and who are deceased. They're moving in the correct direction. The intimate connection for which they share to the loved ones who come to the room is undeniable. You see the looks in these faces, these people who go to a medium session, and you see them crying, you see them shaking. They leave the session believing and feeling they have in fact spoken to someone who's passed away, a loved one, and in fact maybe even they feel often that they've even stood in the same room with them. That's the connection that I'm passing on the message to you about, is that there's a civilization I'm in contact with that does not place such a huge emphasis on face-to-face contact. This is the great discouragement, I'm calling it, of ufology and alien abductions and of the general experiencers and contactees, whatever name you want to call yourself. You have an interest in this, you're here to make this connection. You need to practice and develop your own channeling abilities within yourselves. You researchers need to be very patient and very cautious about this. Again, there's a great need for discernment and to be looking, very carefully, at that right there. When you're looking at individuals that are seeking approval, as you already know, many of you are psychologists and psychiatrists, I would be very cautious about that as a definition to throw out just right away. I'm not getting on anybody's case here, but I've heard it many times, not necessarily directed at me, but at a lot of people who are sensitive and sincere and are showing up with experiences anomalous that they can't explain, or some have explanations. And they very much want to be listened to. It may not be necessarily that they wish to be believed, as it is a case of their sensitive heart connecting to these beings who are in the oneness and unity and often connection to the fifth dimension of ultimate love without judgment. That's another key issue with the ego, is that there's judgment. With ego comes judgment, and there's no love. There isn't any love. Ego, judgment, no love. No ego, no judgment, and then there's nothing but oneness and love and unity. It's very simple. Remove the ego. You've removed the judgment you have against others. There isn't any judgment at this point. The perception is clear. The pane of glass is so crystal clear. Everything has been wiped away. You're seeing everything as it is. The perceptions have now completely cleaned up. These people may not be wanting just to be believed. They could be feeling within their hearts, and I'm just pointing in some directions, a deep inner need within themselves to connect to others this loving message. It's very difficult for some people to grasp and comprehend what they're experiencing in that loving connection. It's very difficult. I have meditated on this and spent time, even as an author and a writer, I have found it difficult at times to describe the overwhelming unconditional love that Beniko and I share with each other. So it's something that's overwhelming like that, even for me, and I'm a trained author. Okay, I'm a writer. I've been to a local school for this over here in England. I'm a writer, and if I'm having a difficult time putting that into words, can you imagine what some of your clients, your contactees are going through? And there's going to be a million things that rush into their heads at once, and they're typing a lot of, it's all a bunch of jumbly stuff coming up on the screen. It's running in different directions. Every researcher I've spoke to, I think, is correct about what they're seeing as far as psychology, but I think that the fifth element in this, they've got the four elements, what they got in school, but no university that I'm aware of that teaches psychology is teaching you this part, which is the fifth element. The fifth element being an individual's connection to a higher dimensional consciousnesses that are loving them purely and unconditionally, without ego, without judgment. That's going to be difficult for these people who are raised in the third dimension to put into terms. They are in contact with an extra-dimensional species out there that loves them dearly. This is a real love, as you know. and they're trying to find from which direction that's coming from. And as scientists have said, I challenge you to point into the fourth dimension from the third dimension. Point in that direction. In the third dimension, I can point up, I can point down, I can point forward, I can point backwards, I can move side to side. I can point in these planes of access in the third dimension, but I cannot point into the fourth dimension. That is not possible. Neither can I point into the fifth dimension. The heart can point into the fifth dimension. The heart can. When the heart's connection is resonating in that pure love, yes, you can point into that direction with your heart. The civilization I'm talking to, Beniko, says, "Why do you?" I'm not channeling Beniko at the moment. I'm not, I'm allowed to pass on messages, but I'm kind of the opening chapter, if you will, for Beniko. I'm just kind of the guy on the first page here who will always be in contact with her and have a deep relationship with her. But as far as the guy that will be channeling Beniko, or the lady that will be channeling Beniko, that's for another video. And perhaps a video they'll be making at some point. But in a completely unconditional, loving, completely forgiving being, you can always discern the messages are always going to be from Beniko, as long as that is on the table. Anything that is anything otherwise, or deals with separation, or someone suggests, Beniko's angry or not talking to this person or whatever, is ridiculous. Complete nonsense. Beniko is a Sesame, the same race from another being that is being channeled in the world at this time. And everything you hear from that being, as I understand it, you're going to get from Beniko, but she's not going to repeat the same messages. All I know, it's going to be very loving mantras. I've kind of joked with her and said it sounds like a cosmic hippie thing. Well, you've been getting the instructions. I guess I'm being told something about getting the mantras next. Well, anyways, the messages I'm passing on. The messages I'm passing on are simply, they know the answer to this question, understanding the human mind and human ways. Stop seeking physical face-to-face contact. You are dealing with a world of people who will ignore even the hardest evidence. Even if it were to stare them in the face, they would just dismiss Beniko as being a deformed girl with large eyes or something like this. They won't actually take anything, even if they land in the White House lawn. Let me tell you something. That is just, they understand the human mind down here completely, inside and out, and it would simply endanger them too much and waste entirely too much time. And when, in any case, why are they trying? Why would they want to convince anyone of what they know they are? And you know what they are. So all the middle people in between go to the side now. Just push them to the side. In time, that physical contact will become more apparent and more solid, more solidified in this dimension. And you will become more aware of their presence. You'll be meeting them in time, as you've already been told. I'm not going to repeat the same messages. And she showed me the example of a third dimension with puddles of water or solid ice on the ground being the human beings on this planet. At the time of the ascension of consciousness, it's described as the water turns to vapor, which would be the fourth state or fourth dimension, rising above the field. It goes from ice to water into the next state of its matter. Consciousness is the same way. It goes through different states as matter moves through different states. So when we become one in unity, we become the steam which rises up and becomes the clouds. That's a very beautiful thought she's giving me. Try to think of it as clouds in the sky overhead. If you ever see clouds, on the ground, the puddles themselves are individuals. But when you pull the water up off the ground, it vaporizes and becomes the clouds above and is now all one mass. I challenge anybody to distinguish that puddle of water anymore when it is now a part of the cloud. You cannot. You can never separate that again. So once you've achieved this, and you can do this in this dimension, I have done this with Beniko. Once you have done this, and it's not hard to do within yourself, you can't be pulled away from this and placed back on the ground someplace again. You're already a part of this. As I said before, connecting to a telepath, they forever imprint themselves in you and you into them. It's not screening. You have every bit of her soul within yourself, and within yourself into that person. So she's very much me now, and I'm very much her. On these video sets you've been watching, in fact, you are in fact staring at a form of her looking at you. I am very much her in that respect. In unity, I'm very much Beniko. Because we've imprinted our consciousness in this intimate way with each other. This is a difficult concept for some to come to terms with, as I didn't just meet this being face to face and feel her and, well, that's it. Time passed and moved on. And the military altered my memories in some way so that now that connection's gone. No. That was scratching the surface of my consciousness is all it did. The energy matrix within me and the vibrational field has matched identically and perfectly with hers. Her memories, her feelings, her thoughts, her love, and her soul is matched with mine and mine with hers, and we are one in unity in this. It's a marriage, a beautifully blended marriage, perfectly blended in that respect. No matter if I had amnesia and had suffered a serious head injury and I can't remember anything for the rest of my life, I will continue to feel that love, and that connection remains. As our energies, the heart never forgets. I see through her eyes and she sees through mine. What I would encourage you to do is, and many of you have already done it, is connect through channeling. And do not dismiss this as a means of contact at this point in time. Everything begins with a beginning. Respect the cultures of other civilizations and races. It is within the confines of their culture that this is their means of communication and contact. And I do find it very sacred. Very sacred. I'm not suggesting you all become channelers publicly and go out there and sit in front of audiences. I am saying, however, privately, for those of you who wish and long for that deep longing and loving connection with your ET families and the hybrids and the Sesame and all like, the Greys, the reptilians, let me first tell you that I have a lot of respect for the good reptilians and love and compassion for them. They are very much within this sphere of love that I'm talking about. I am aware of Sesame dealing with what we'll call good reptilians for right now that are very beneficial to mankind and to themselves and are on missions of goodwill and kindness and love. I know of some reptilians that have done incredibly good things in this planet with regards to saving children in an orphanage, and the children then went off and called them angels or green angels. So this is all very much connected in the family. No one's left out. It's not a species issue where you have to be a certain species to be doing this, or a certain look, or none of that matter. As this is the philosophy, is we're all equal. It doesn't make any difference. the species size, or you're a reptilian of some kind. So there is this beautiful connection of love and oneness, and I'm asking you to meditate within your heart, close your eyes, and repeat a mantra of love that only you know within your heart. Do not reveal to anyone else, and it's a mantra you will share with your ET family contactee, the being or beings you connect to, and keep saying the mantra to yourself quietly with your eyes shut until you feel that connect. You may already have that connection. You feel it within your heart. You hear the being saying it with you. You're now saying it together. You're saying it together. The voice is in your mind. You're saying it together. There. You're connected. Okay. All else is released and pushed aside. All pain and suffering is now released. It is not permanent. It's gone. And connect in this way. Start dealing with channeling, as that this is the message I'm bringing you now is privately get into channeling within your circles. You have trusted researchers who are sincere and kind-hearted people who are listening to you, who want to help. They do play a part in this. They are helping to keep things in check, if you will. A lot of feelings and emotions get involved and can cloud judgment, and that can happen to the best of us. Researchers play the impartial bystander watching the situation. They're not always going to be wanting to take this to the public. They're not always going to want to be trying to make a name for themselves or publish you in a book. They're not always trying to expose you. They're not secretly trying to move these beings out of your life. How do I know? You'll know because the message is love. If this individual is caring and compassionate and sincere, you know that. So you can deal with that person confidently and lovingly, and you know to trust this person, then carry on with that. If there's a nefarious person working against you, you'll know that too. Use your judgment. You're not unable to judge this. I'd like to give special thanks to, I'm going to continue to do some videos, but to researcher David Chase for his work with me, and patience, obviously. As it does require patience with experiencers and contactees. There is a degree of patience which is involved in this, and I look forward to continue working there. There's a lot of people I'm working with. Joanne Summerscales. I'd like to thank her also for phone chats with her, and I'll be continuing to post videos. And I give you love and peace and oneness. We are all equal in heart. We send you love, and we send you peace to all.